Just a reminder before today's programme that the previous part, Part 3 of the AMTV DVD Collection, is still available for you to view. And now, here on AMTV, we return once again to the DVD Collection. Time for Part 4. Hi there guys, it's Adam Martyn here, and welcome back to part 4 of the AMTV DVD Collection. We're still on the big old main bookshelf, and today we will be taking a look at shelf number 4, which is that one across there. If you haven't seen parts 1, 2 and 3, I highly recommend you check that out first if you want to go in the sort of alphabetical order, but for now let's take a look at what lies on shelf number 4. Alright, kicking things off with Little Shop of Horrors, the classic film from the 1980s, the classic musical with Rick Moranis. I love this film, it's just so much fun, there's a lot of heart in it, it's very wacky musical. It's definitely one I'd recommend. There is an original from 1960 that has Jack Nicholson in a cameo, but that's the definitive version if you ask me. Next up we have this, Logan from 2017. This was like Hugh Jackman's magnum opus for the character, if you like. It's definitely, in my opinion, his finest appearance as Wolverine, a culmination of 17 years of playing one role, and it's unlikely he's probably going to take up the role again, but you know what? This was a very fitting end for his character, and a great movie as well, so recommend that. Another Logan film, funnily enough, we have this, Logan's Run, which was a film from 1976, very wacky sci-fi film from the time. Of course, it's pre-Star Wars. It's very interesting. It's about like a society where you only live till you're 30, or at least that's what they think. Just a very interesting classic sci-fi film, if you like. Not the best, but not the worst. Now, this was a good movie. This is Lovelace, starring Amanda Seyfried. Now, it's about the famous porn star, Linda Lovelace, who is famous for the film Deep Throat. I'm trying to keep this as family-friendly as possible. And it's a very interesting film into, I guess, what that industry was like back in the early 1970s and the lengths they had to go to. It's a very good movie, a very well-made movie, and I actually highly recommend it. So, no dirty thoughts, please. Now we have some really fun films. Here we have Machete, starring Danny Trejo. Machete was like a character in the Spy Kids franchise, like a very small character. He got his own film. It's like gory as anything, proper grindhouse film by Robert Rodriguez, and it's a lot of fun. Like, you're not supposed to take this seriously at all. Just go in with this and have an absolute ball. And there was a sequel 2 years later called Machete Kills. It's down to 15 rather than 18, which is a shame. Lady Gaga's in this one for some reason, but yeah, there she is. See, before Star is Born, of course. I think they plan to make a third film because they do leave it on a cliffhanger. As of 2020, that third film hasn't happened yet. I do hope it does someday, but at the minute, it's not looking that likely, which is a shame. Now I've got this, Maggie, which is an Arnold Schwarzenegger film, and it's a really good acting performance for him. He plays a father who, realistically, his daughter's going to be a zombie. It's like, you know, one of those pandemic films. I won't spoil too much of it, but if you want a good Arnold Schwarzenegger performance, then you definitely need to watch Maggie. It's a very, very good film. Now, one of my favourite films, unashamedly, is Mannequin. I think I've said in previous parts, I am a sucker for 80s, like, feel-good movies, like goofy feel-good movies, and Mannequin is quite literally the definition of that. The premise being that this shop worker, you know, down on his luck, a bit of a dope, this mannequin comes to life, they fall in love, and hilarity ensues. Really fun movie, one of my favourites ever. I love, 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 love it. Next up, we have a DVD steelbook. We've got Metropolis. Now, this film was originally made in 1927. However, this is the 1984 release. Back then, they found some new footage, but being a silent film, they re-released it, but with like modern pop songs. So you got songs from Freddie Mercury and Bonnie Tyler and all sorts, and it's a very hit or miss version of Metropolis. I'd say it's definitely not the definitive edition of said film. I haven't seen the original yet. I do own it, but yeah, it's an interesting side experiment, I think, that one. Now I've got a film from Danny Boyle. This is Millions, as far as I know. Oh no, he's probably made some since, but his very first 12-rated film. Millions is a very heartwarming story. It was released in the mid-2000s. Very heartwarming indeed. Definitely not his best film, but it's fine for what it is. If you like Danny Boyle, you'll probably enjoy this work for what it is. Now, a more good bit of fun. This is Mindhorn, which is basically a pastiche on the whole, you know, 80s detective sort of thing. Very funny, tongue very firmly in cheek. And yeah, there's not much more to it than that, but yeah, it's definitely worth a watch if you're into that sort of comedy. Now, this is an interesting one for me. This is The Miracle Maker, and yes, this is the story of Christ. Now, I'm not religious, I'm actually a raging atheist, but this was always an interesting one for me. This is a stop-motion telling of that, and I remember this being advertised all the time on like my VHSs as a kid, and I remember finding the animation style quite interesting, and I watched it a few years ago, and you know what? It's not, in terms of telling a story, it's not bad. Obviously, I don't believe any of it, but it's a very interesting way of telling that story. So yeah, glad that I finally own it. Now I've got some TV. This is Mr. Men, the complete classic collection. It's a 2-disc set, and this is all episodes of the Mr. Men series in the 70s. I grew up with this stuff, not at the time, but on VHS, and narrated by the wonderful Arthur Lowe. And yeah, it's just, there's 28 episodes in total, featuring all the Mr. Men you know and love. There is a Little Miss release as well. I don't own that, but I'll probably get that at some point in the future. But you can't not love Mr. Men, I think. Now we've got The Mummy, the Universal version. I actually have a different version of this, which we'll probably get to in another part. This was a recent release from a few years ago. I love this cover, like the retro movie poster. It comes to life. The 1932 film of The Mummy, and it includes a 90-minute bonus disc with like a brilliant documentary about the Universal monsters. It's one of the main reasons I picked up this release in the first place. So if you like Universal horror, this is a good version of it to get if you just want this film and not any of the sequels. And I've got some James Bond, but the non-canon. This is Never Say Never Again. Yes, it does star Sean Connery as James Bond. He was in his 50s at this point. This came out in 1983. And it's not a good film. This is basically a rehash of the film Thunderball, just nowhere near as good, and I never really liked Thunderball anyway. If you're a James Bond completionist and you want to see everything that was put out, watch it, but again, it's not part of the canon, and it's just not a very good film, if you ask me. Some more TV. This was a brilliant miniseries, The Night Manager, starring Tom Hiddleston and Hugh Laurie. It's absolutely brilliant part series. It was on the BBC. If you haven't seen it and you want to see tour de force performances from both of these leads, it's definitely worth a watch. One of the best dramas on the BBC in recent years. Now we've got this one, Nightmare on Elm Street, The Collection. This was a great set. I've had this for years, actually. I know they've done recent sets, but they're all containing the same films. This has 7 Nightmare on Elm Street films across 8 discs. So you've got Nightmare on Elm Street 1, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, number 3, Dream Warriors, 4, The Dream Master, 5, The Dream Child, 6, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, and 7, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And the 8th disc is just about, documentary special features. It was actually a really great set to pick up, and yeah, I think you can still get this new for like £15. It's definitely worth the money. There are newer sets though. It doesn't contain the remake from 2010, and that's probably for the best because I didn't like that remake at all. It didn't include Freddy vs. Jason, but I guess that's not too bad. That was its own separate thing. Now you've got this of Mice and Men, the classic story by John Steinbeck featuring John Malkovich and Gary Sinise. And this is a really great film. I studied this book in secondary school, so of course we had to watch the film, and it's a really great telling of it, so I highly recommend that if you have an affinity with the book. More classic horror now. We have The Old Dark House. This is a network release actually, but it was directed by the director of Frankenstein, stars Boris Karloff, and The Old Dark House is very much like a haunted house sort of thing, but it's very atmospheric, it's very good despite its age. So yeah, if you like your classic horror, The Old Dark House is certainly one for you. Now we have this, Olympus Has Fallen from 2013, starring Gerard Butler. I really like this one, the idea of the White House being, invaded, and they did make sequels. They made London Has Fallen, and I believe it's Angel Has Fallen. I haven't seen those, I've heard they're not very good, but that first one, I thought the first one was actually really good. And then we have the Omega Man, which is based roughly off the I Am Legend book. And yes, there is the I Am Legend film with Will Smith. However, this came out in the 1970s with Charlton Heston. It's a decent film for what it is. It's nothing groundbreaking at all, but it's fun for what it is. Now we have more Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, but not the Cornetto trilogy. This is Paul, their foray into aliens. And I remember seeing this at the cinema, and at the age 14, this was like the most hilarious thing ever. However, I haven't watched it since, and I'm worried that I'll watch it now and I probably won't find it very funny, so I need to delve back into Paul at some point. Now we have Paul Blart Mall Cop. I see this film get memed a lot, but again, when I watched this at the time, it was actually a decent movie. It's probably very cringe now, and I have seen the sequel. The sequel is not good. You shouldn't watch that, but this is fun for all the family sort of thing, Now we have a sequel. I usually keep my Disney stuff separate, but some of the sequels I keep to one side, like this one. This is Peter Pan Return to Neverland, or Peter Pan 2. This was released in 2002, nearly 50 years after the original. But do you know what? For a sequel starring Wendy's daughter there on the front cover, it's actually a really competent sequel. I used to have it on VHS, and I enjoyed it. You know, I think with a lot of those Disney sequels, as a kid, you don't realise the jumps in time between when each one was made. I certainly didn't, but yeah, not a bad sequel. Now I've got a set of 2 films. Here is the abominable Dr. Phibe, starring the master of horror himself, Vincent Price. I do love Vincent Price. This is an early 70s film about a doctor setting traps for people. It's very much like a precursor, if you like, to the Saw franchise and what it wants to achieve. But I did really enjoy this film. It was a good one. And it actually got a sequel the following year called Dr. Phibe's Rises Again. I would argue it's not as good as the original. The original has more impact, but still it has its great horror moments, and I'd highly recommend the sequel. Next up, we have Philadelphia, a classic film from the 90s with Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington, highlighting the discrimination against people who had the AIDS disease back in the 80s and 90s. Very powerful film. I think it's a must-watch. They need to show it in schools and stuff, so check out Philadelphia. Now more pastiche horror. Here's Piranha 3D, which I'm nearly dropping because it's that terrible. I mean, what do you say about this? This is just a very pastiche horror film. It's a laugh. I watch it with friends for a laugh. Do you know what I mean? It's nothing that bad. And then you have this Piranha DD, or 3DD. Get the joke? Haha, so corny. Yeah, this film's not very good either. But, you know, if you want a horror laugh, then that's there for you. Speaking of laughs, here's Porky's. From the early 80s, again, this is very much like a locker room film, like with the lads. It's very pastiche, very corny, but I must admit, very entertaining. I'll give it that much, but I know there's a sequel and stuff. Now you have Race, which is the great story about Jesse Owens at the 1936 Olympics. Of course, then it was held in Berlin, Hitler was in power, and yet this black man ran and pretty much stormed the board. It's a powerful film, a very good film. Highly recommend that one. And then finishing off this side of the shelf, we have The Raid, which is a great foreign film with lots of intense high action and all that sort of stuff. Some of the best fight choreography I've ever seen. So yeah, check out The Raid if you're into that sort of stuff. And now we move on to the second side of shelf number 4, looking at this, The Railway Children, a classic film starring Bernard Cribbins in a role, amongst others. Again, this was one that I looked at in primary school. We were reading the books, we had to watch the film, and it's very, very much an old British film, but it's very heartwarming, as a lot of those films are. Now we've got a series, we've got the Rec series, which is Spanish horror films. Really atmospheric. This one is found footage, and a lot of the times I think found footage is a bit awful. However, the Rec series, if I'd had to recommend any found footage horror series, you need to watch Rec. Very powerful horror. Arguably bested, or in my opinion bested, in the sequel, which is Rec 2 Fear Revisited. I'd argue this is even scarier. It takes place, if I remember rightly, on the same night as the first one. So check that out. Then they had to keep going, and they made Rec 3 Genesis, or just Rec Genesis. This one is half found footage, half not found footage. It's a bit jarring. It's not, you know, brilliant. It's a far step down from the first two. And then they had to keep making even more by finishing off the saga with Rec 4, or just Rec Apocalypse. And this takes place on a boat, if I remember, and there's no found footage, and it's just, yeah, it's arguably the weakest of the whole franchise. Stick to the first two of those, but ignore the second two. Now we have this, The Red Turtle, a collaboration with Studio Ghibli and another studio, I can't remember, but what I love about this film is there's hardly any dialogue to it whatsoever, and it's just a really beautiful film to watch. So if you're into that sort of stuff and you've got the patience, check out The Red Turtle. Now you've got some more horror. We have, backwards, The Ring, which of course is not the original Japanese Ringu. This is the Americanized version of that. And Ringu is better, I have seen it, and, you know, but this one's alright for what it is. It's not terrible, but it's by no means the definitive edition of that story. Next up, more foreign films. We have Robo Geisha, which literally is a ridiculous film. It's so out there, so wacky, like Alien vs. Ninja before it. Just, if you're in for a wacky time, Robo Geisha is there for you. Now we have a recent film. We have Rocketman, the story of Elton John. I really enjoyed this film. In terms of comparing this to Bohemian Rhapsody, I think I preferred Bohemian, although I appreciate this one's style more, that it was a bit different, you know, a bit more wacky, because that was very much the life of Elton John, and Taron Egerton smashed it. So, yeah, recommend Rocketman. Now we have Ronin, featuring Robert De Niro, film from the late 90s. DVD Steelbook this as well. Yeah, really good action film. Nothing too special in my opinion, but a very enjoyable film nonetheless. And then next up, more Schwarzenegger. We have The Running Man from 1987. A really cool idea, you know, about a futuristic game show, and of course Schwarzenegger's the main action star. Definitely not his most memorable film, but a worthwhile film to watch nonetheless. And then we have The Sense of an Ending, which is a film starring Jim Broadbent, Michelle Docherty, Charlotte Rampling, amongst others. It's a very sweet film. It's a film about growing older, about lives past. A very British film again, but if you're into that sort of thing, I highly recommend it. Another heartwarming piece. Now I've got some more like London gangs. We have Shank, which is another term for being stabbed, for those who didn't know. It's from the same... It's a distributor of Kidulthood, not the same team necessarily. It's definitely not as good as the Hood trilogy, in my opinion. They're more powerful. This one, but it's alright, you know, it's what you expect looking at the cover. Now we have Danny Boyle's first foray into directing, which was Shallow Grey, featuring Kerry Fox, Christopher Eccleston, and Ewan McGregor, amongst others, in very early roles. And despite being Danny Boyle's first directed piece, this is actually a very competent, very well-made film. I actually really enjoy Shallow Grey. There's a lot of great moments to it, and I highly recommend it, despite it being his first foray. This is an interesting release I have. This is Shattered Family. Now, from what I understand, this was originally a TV movie. I got this from my grandmother, and she had a bunch of stuff, you know, recorded, and it's actually, I think, a DVD-R. It's an American TV movie about a family, you know, even an 11-year-old has rights. This is his true story, it says. Again, very powerful film for a TV movie, so I'd recommend it, but I don't think there's an official release of this, not to my knowledge. Now, one of the true classics and the highest rated film on IMDb is The Shawshank Redemption. I've got this really cool 3-disc special edition, which has, I mean, it's filled to the brim with, you know, bonus features and special editions of the film. It's just a really great release, and I think I only got it for like £1, so if you can find that, get it, absolutely. And now we have Shutter Island, some more Leonardo DiCaprio. Very good film, but again, it's like Inception. I feel it's one of those you've got to really be paying attention to it to get the most out of it. Some DC now. I don't have much DC, but here is Shazam. I really enjoyed this film. I was very skeptical at first, but then I watched it with my brother, and it actually is like a really fun film. I wish DC took this direction more often, so it's nice to have it now. And then we have a film from the 80s, Short Circuit, which is about a robot becoming sentient and developing a personality. Again, like Mannequin, you could argue it's quintessential 80s cheese, but I love it. I haven't seen the sequel, though, but apparently it's not very good. Now we have a collection. We have the Sidney Poitier collection, a great actor. So we have 4 films. We have In the Heat of the Night, its sequel, They Call Me Mr. Tibbs, the threequel, The Organisation, and a separate film, Lilies of the Field. Now, In the Heat of the Night, of course, won Best Picture in 1967. Lilies of the Field was what won Sidney his Best Actor Oscar, and he was indeed the first black actor to receive that famous award. These films are fun. In the Heat of the Night and Lilies of the Field are the best ones, obviously. These two are more like pastiche and a bit more worse, but, you know, he's a brilliant actor, Sidney Poitier. Now we have Signs, a film from M. Night Shyamalan. M. Night Shyamalan films, I either find I love them or hate them, like most people. This is one of the good ones. Sort of like, you know, Alien Invasion, Crop Circle thing. But, yeah, definitely not his worst film. Unlike The Village, I couldn't stand The Village. And then we have The Simpsons movie. I'm a big Simpsons fan, so of course I was going to own the movie. Great film to see when it first came out in 2007. Some more horror with Sinister. And, yeah, as horrors go, like, there's definitely a lot worse out there. But I remember people raved about this at the time, and I just thought there wasn't anything particularly special about it. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. But, yeah, I don't remember raving about that one. Some more now. We have Slither, which still has its sticker on it. That was £1, apparently. Yeah, a very bizarre horror film, but again, very enjoyable. I'm glad I own it. It's, yeah, very weird horror film. And now the best film ever made, of course, Snakes on a Plane with Samuel L. Jackson. This is exactly what you expect, you know, it's very daft, it's very stupid. Samuel L. Jackson's having a whale of a time. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it. You owe it to yourself, I think. Now we have The Snowman, the classic animation at Christmas time, originally broadcast on Channel 4. When I bought this, I'd never actually seen The Snowman, but like most people say, it's a very sweet story, and it's very, you know, lovely animation, so yeah, highly recommended. And to finish things off with part 4, we have a lot of Sonic. That's right, starting off with this, The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, the box set, the complete series, all 65 episodes. So this show was originally broadcast in the early 90s. In fact, this was my very first introduction to Sonic as a character, not the games, this TV show, watched on holiday. And yeah, this show is really wacky and out there, definitely aimed at children, which is probably why I loved it when I first saw it. Probably doesn't hold up that well today, but yeah, I mean, 65 episodes, that is good bang for your buck, if you ask me, of this wacky show. And there was more shows, like this one, for example. This is Sonic the Hedgehog, the complete series, all 26 episodes. This is known as Sat AM Sonic. So this aired at the same time as The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. I believe this only aired on Saturdays, hence the term Sat AM. And this series was known for being a lot darker. You know, it was a bit more serious, a bit aimed at kids who were a little bit older. There are special features as well. And yeah, it's just nice to have that variety, I guess. A lot of people think this show's better, and in many ways it is. But it's nice to have the balance of both, like, the kid-friendly stuff and a more, not adult, but mature version, if you like. And then you have this Sonic Underground. This was made in the late 90s, and for some reason they decided to give Sonic two siblings, a brother and a sister, and it's all about finding their mother, and they play musical instruments. It's a very strange show that only aired in the late 90s. There's 40 episodes to it, so it's a long time. It didn't really have a proper conclusion from what I remember, but I did used to enjoy this show a lot when it was on. You know, it was fun enough for the age I was, so yeah, all for that there. Nice bit of Sonic. So you got the 3 Sonic series in the corner. And that, my friends, just about does it for shelf number 4 in the AMTV DVD collection. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to leave a like on it and let me know in the comments below. Out of the stuff we looked at today, do you own any of it as well? Is there still stuff you wish I owned or recommendations you have? Let me know in the comments. Please subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. And until the next one, I will see you guys next time. A massive thank you to our producer and director patrons for your support towards us here at AMTV. You just help keep us going, and that's massively appreciated. And that does bring us to the end of another evening here on AMTV. We hope you enjoyed the programme, and we hope to see you next time. Good night.